Sunday School. Thank you for joining us again this week and watching Sunday School. I hope you've enjoyed the lessons that I've already done, and I hope you continue to watch each week. Next Sunday, October 11th, we will do our next Zoom call. I hope most of you can join us. I will send an email out to your parents with the link for the Zoom call. And I look forward to getting just to chat with some of you about what's been going on, maybe at school, in your lives. I also hope that you can tell me just a little bit more about each of you, like some kind of activity you like to do. Maybe you play soccer, maybe you play baseball, maybe you have a certain thing you like to do when you come home from school or come home from daycare or come home from the babysitter. Or maybe just something you like to do at home when your schoolwork is done. I would love, that's kind of going to be what we talk about in our next Zoom call. Next Sunday, October 11th at 10:30. And I will, like I said, I will send out an email to your parents with that link next week. And just as a reminder, we continue to have worship services each Sunday at the church. At 8 a.m., we have communion on the lot, and you stay in your cars for that. And then at 10:30 every Sunday morning, we do have a sanctuary service that you come and you go into the church just like normal. It's about a 30-minute service. You do have to wear a mask, and we ask that you socially distance when you sit in the pews at the church. I hope you will join us for one of those. And as always, you can find each Sunday's worship also on our YouTube channel. We are now in the season of fall, and in fall, there's some big changes that happen if you look outside. Some things are already starting to change a little bit, but I'm talking about the trees. The leaves on the trees start to change colors. I want you to look at this picture. The first leaf is the green one. What most leaves look like in the middle of September. They slowly change until they get to the brown colored one on the other side, and they fall off the tree. Sometimes the leaves actually fall off when they're still colored, and then they crinkle up to that brown color once they're off the tree. Depends on the tree. This change is predictable. Most of you, even when you're really little in preschool, when you talk about the season of fall, you talk about the changing leaves. The leaves change colors and they fall off the trees. It's something that happens every year. It's predictable. This same change happens every year. It's part of God's plan. We can see other parts of God's plan in nature as well. Like the sunrise and the sunset. We know that every day the sun comes up and every day the sun will set. Also, in the spring, we can plant a seed and it will come up. Or we plant flowers that are small and they grow. That's all part of God's plan. But God doesn't only have a plan for nature. It has a plan for each one of you. Each one of you and me. And everybody. God has a plan for everybody. And our story today is going to talk about God's plan for two people. But before we hear our story, let's fold our hands and close our eyes. Dear God, thank you for having a plan for everything you created. Help us learn from today's lesson about the plan you made for Abram and Sarah. Amen. Today we're going to hear a story about the big changes God had for Abram and Sarah. Abram and Sarah are the people that we talked about in last week's story who moved from one area. God sent them a message and said it's time to move to a new area. That was part of the first part of his plan, and now this is another part of his plan. And I want you to listen carefully how God tells Abram and Sarah about the new plan he has for them. Remember, Abram and Sarah were very, very old. This week's story comes from the book of Genesis. That's the first book in the Old Testament. And those of you that are looking it up in the Bible, it's in the beginning of the Bible, but the verses are all listed here because it's in chapter 17, verses 1 through 7, and then also verse 15 and 16, and then chapter 18, verses 1 through 15, and chapter 21, verses 1 through 7. So that's a lot to remember, but it's all right here on the pamphlet of the smaller pamphlets, or it's listed right here on the big pamphlet, depending on which one you have. Parents, I encourage you some week to maybe open up a Bible you have at home and read out of the actual Bible instead of just following along in the Spark Story Bible. I like to do the Spark Story Bible because it does have the pictures for the kids to watch, especially for the younger kids. But I think some of them could learn something by just listening to you read out of the actual Bible as well. So if you don't read it other times during the week, it might be a good time to read the Bible story from the Sunday school lesson. I am going to read, like I said again, from the Spark Story Bible, this week's story. Today's story is called Abraham and Sarah's Visitors. When Abram was 99 years old, he and his wife Sarai were still waiting for God's promise of a huge family to come. Abram was getting frustrated. He asked God, "What are you waiting for?" God spoke to Abram, "I will keep my promise and I will change your names. Instead of Abram, your name will be Abraham. Instead of Sarai, instead of Sarai, your wife will be Sarah." Abram was afraid of what God said. He thought he was too old to become the father of so many people, and his wife was too old to have children. He fell on his face and peeked up with one eye. Could God really make such a thing happen? Later, Abraham was sitting by the tent. He saw 3 strangers walking towards him. Abram squinted into the sun and wondered who would be visiting him on such a hot day. "Hi," Abram said as they arrived. "You must be tired from traveling. Would you like to sit down and rest and have some food?" Quickly, Abram asked Sarah to make some bread. He ordered his servant to prepare some meat. Sarah stood hiding in the tent, listening to the visitors. Who are they? Why had they come to her house? And why were they talking about her? She leaned in a little closer. "Your wife Sarah will have a son," the visitor said to Abraham. Sarah started to laugh. Didn't they know that she was too old to have children? The visitors looked up. "Why is Sarah laughing?" they asked. "Doesn't she believe God's promise will happen?" God's promise to Abram did happen. Sarah had a baby boy and named him Isaac, which means laughter. Abram and Sarah's family grew and grew and grew, and God blessed each generation with laughter and happiness. So in that story, we heard how Abram, God changed his name, and then he was told that he was going by some visitors that he and Sarah were going to have children when they were very, very old, which isn't normal. So I want you to think about this question. What did Sarah do when she heard she was going to have a baby? Remember, she was in the tent. What did she do? She was listening from kind of behind where they were. She laughed because she thought she was too old. Later, when the baby was born, they named him Isaac, and that name means laughter. I'm sure all of the names that you're named have a meaning too. You could even ask your parents what the meaning of your name is and find out if there's a reason they picked that name. God had a plan for Abram and Sarah, just like he has a plan for us. And what's really neat is that not only does God have a plan for each of us, but each of our plans are different. So God has a different plan for every single person, which is really neat. So this week in the pamphlets, you have those of younger kiddos that have the bigger pamphlet with the stickers. You're going to be using these stickers right here. You're going to put those in where they normally go. And you can do some of the other activities as well. We're not going to do actually any type of activity from either of the pamphlets this week. And then my older kiddos, you have this pamphlet and you can do this one. As you go through, parents, if you're watching, or even older kids, if you're watching and you do an activity and you're not sure of the answers, please just send me an email and I can give you the answers so that you can kind of either check your answers, or parents, you can kind of guide your kiddo or kiddos through the activity. I don't include them in the video, obviously, because I want the kids to kind of think through them, but I am more than happy to give you the answers if you're not quite sure on anything. This activity right here, this one here is kind of neat because it kind of goes through almost like you'd put in a baby book. It might be neat to talk with your kiddos, and kids, you can ask your parents some questions about when you were a baby or as you were growing up, like when I started to walk and talk. All those things are part of your individual plan that God has for you. So we're going to do something a little different, and each of you can do it differently. I think it would be good for you to at least write down the answers and then talk to your parents about it a little bit. But I want you to think about these questions. So if you have a piece of paper, or pause the video and go get a piece of paper, or if you're young and you can't write very well yet, you can have a mom or a dad write your answers for you. So here's the question. Here's question 1. What is your favorite food? So think about what your favorite food is right now and write that down. And you might even want to write favorite food and then write it. What is your favorite song to either listen to or to sing? What is your favorite song to listen to or to sing right now? What is your favorite thing to do or play? It might be a certain toy to play with, or a certain activity that you do that you absolutely love. Like when you don't have anything to do and you start to get bored, what is it that you tend to go and do? What is your favorite color? So I want you to think about those things, right? Hopefully you wrote them down on a piece of paper. And when our video is done today, I would like you to talk with your family or a parent and ask them if the answers to those questions are the same as they were maybe several years ago, or when you were young, like when you were 1 or 2 and just started eating food. What was your favorite food then versus what it is now? Has it changed? Sometimes things like that change. Your favorite song or your favorite song to sing or listen to probably changes. When you were little, it may have been like a little Sunday school song that we sang in Sunday school. It may have been a little song that they sang at preschool and you used to sing it all the time. Well, now that you're older, some of you older kiddos that listen to music, maybe you listen to a song, but you probably don't listen to the same kinds of music or the same song anymore. So talk as a family about some of the things, how things as we grow even though it's all part of God's plan, it changes the things that we like. We all change and grow, just like the leaves outside we talked about early on change, but we know that it doesn't make it a bad thing. Change isn't a bad thing. It changes so that next year the tree can go through the cycle again. Just like when we change, we can change and it can be a good thing. And all that change is part of God's plan. Think about something that you learned to do in the last year. Maybe it was write some letters. Maybe you learned how to write. Maybe it was coloring in the lines of a picture. Maybe it was learning to ride a bike. I know this summer I spotted some children that usually go to Sunday school at St. Paul's that I think probably are watching. I spotted them riding their bikes, and I know at least one of them had just started to learn to ride the bike, and I'm not sure, it may have been both of you that just got a lot better on your bike. But that was fun to see and something that you got to do. I know someone that watches Sunday school is learning to ride a skateboard and do all sorts of tricks, if that's what they're called. I wouldn't know because Mrs. Cox never skateboarded, and that's not going to happen. But learning those new things, it's all part of God's plan for you. And that's why, and God helps us learn those new things because it's part of his plan. So let's say a prayer before we end. Dear God, thank you for teaching us that you have a plan for each of us, just like you had a plan for Abram and Sarah. Please help us follow your plan as we go through our week and through our lives. Amen.